Okay, we're going to go ahead and get going. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar. My name is Charles All. I am the Executive Director for the Kentucky Chamber Center for Policy and Research. Today, we're going to talk about childcare resources for the Kentucky business community. This has obviously been a big issue in Kentucky, not only for children and families, but also for our business community as well. And so really what we're going to be talking about today specifically are some of the unique resources that are currently available to Kentucky employers to help their workers address some of the childcare challenges that they're facing. So we're not going to talk about every facet of childcare in this webinar. That's a huge topic, and it's one that certainly merits a much longer webinar than what we're going to be doing today. Instead, this is going to be highly focused specifically on some of those resources that are available for employers. And I'm seeing a note here, can we have closed captioning on? Claire from our team over here. Claire, if you're able to add that, that would be a great addition. So we'll see if we can get closed captioning up and going. The webinar here today is we're gonna try to go for about 30 minutes. I want to try to keep this thing as concise as we can. We are going to be recording this. So if you miss anything, don't worry about it. This is something we'll have available to circulate after the webinar is concluded. I also want to make sure that we reserve some time for questions. So I'm going to be sort of presenting at the same time as we go through this webinar. So I'll try to get to questions towards the end of this webinar. So with that, I want to start things off by just talking a little bit about why this is such a key issue for Kentucky employers and why the business community is so invested in the issue of childcare in Kentucky. A lot of this goes back to some of the workforce challenges that Kentucky is facing. Workforce challenges in the state are nothing new. For those of you that have followed the chamber and its work, you know that this is something we've been talking about as a long-term systemic issue in Kentucky. Workforce participation is something that has been in a steady state of decline for about the past 20 years, and that has put a lot of pressure on our labor market. But what we're experiencing right now is truly exceptional in terms of the tightness of our labor market and the lack of availability of workers. This chart, I think, underscores that. What you're looking at is the number of job vacancies in Kentucky versus the number of individuals that are unemployed and actively looking for work. That blue line represents those job vacancies based on data from May of 2022, had around 170,000 or so open jobs. In terms of workers at that same time, close to around 80,000. I think the specific number is around 79,000, meaning we have twice as many open jobs as we have individuals looking for work. There's a whole lot of factors that are contributing to that dynamic and making it hard for employers to hire. But one of those key factors is going to be childcare. We can look at a whole range of different survey data and polling data that really underscores the impacts that childcare is having on workforce participation and workforce availability. Some polling from the organization called the Bipartisan Policing Center underscores this. 68% of parents report saying that childcare affected their ability to stay in the workforce. 1 in 5 have actually reported quitting a job to stay at home with a child. The Kentucky Chamber has done a little bit of our own surveying on this issue. Last year, we spent some time traveling throughout the state, talking with employers about some of the key workforce challenges that they were facing in their regions within the state. We gave them a whole list of options to pick from, ranging from things related to skilled workers and substance use and transportation issues. But 56% of the employers that we surveyed agreed with the statement that too many people in their region struggle with childcare that keeps them from participating in the workforce, which is a pretty significant number. We can also look at resources such as Census Bureau data. There's a survey they conduct called the Household Pulse Survey, where we can actually look at Kentucky and see that we have about 46,000 Kentuckians that are not working because of care for children not in school or daycare. If you were to kind of think about the impact that that has on labor force participation, that accounts for almost a full percentage point, which is that's a very, very large number when you're talking about a full percentage point of labor force participation. So these are all really big issues. And this is something that we have grown increasingly concerned about at the chamber. And so we have tackled this issue heavily from a policy perspective, but we also want to make sure that businesses are aware of the numerous different types of resources that are already available to them that oftentimes are not being heavily utilized. And so one of the things the chamber has done recently is that we released a new resource guide that walks through a number of different resources that are available to employers to help them address the child care challenges of their workers. And so some of these things are going to be social assistance programs, there's grant programs, there's also some really key tax incentives. And one of the things that I think kind of underscores everything that we're going to be talking about today is that a lot of these resources are heavily underutilized. And some of that is because of maybe some structural issues, but a lot of it just comes down to awareness. And so that's one of the key reasons that we released this childcare resources guide for Kentucky businesses, is to raise awareness of all these opportunities that are out there for businesses that want to increase their investment in helping their workforces deal with childcare and childcare related challenges. And so we're going to walk through a number of these programs today. We're going to be talking very, very high level, but we are going to include links to different resources that you can access that will allow you to get as granular as you want to go with this information. So we're kind of going to just storm through these as quickly as we can. Before we get into that, I do want to offer a quick disclaimer. At the Chamber, my primary job is doing policy analysis and research. I am not an HR professional. I'm not an employment attorney. I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a certified accountant. A guest I'm going to introduce here in a minute, also not one of those things either. So one of the things I want to state from the get-go is that before you as an employer start pursuing or implementing any of the programs that we discuss in this webinar today, I want to strongly recommend that you consult with a qualified human resources professional, an employment attorney, or a tax attorney, or a certified accountant, to make sure you are going about all of these things as accurately and by the book as you can. So please, I really do want to underscore the importance of doing that before you start pursuing any of these particular programs. I want to start really quickly with, I think, some very basic information. One of the questions that I get more than anything when I talk to employers is, how can I find childcare providers in my region? Are there any childcare providers in my county? What are the closest childcare providers? Where can I go? And there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can go about getting an answer to that question. There are entities that exist called childcare resource and referral agencies, also known as CCR&Rs. One of the things that CCR&Rs specialize in is actually helping individuals and families and even employers find access to childcare. There's a number of different CCR&Rs that are operating in Kentucky. Again, if you go back to the resources document that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's available on the Chamber's website, you can learn all about different CCR&Rs and find ways to look them up. There's also companies that work as childcare benefit administrators for businesses. So if you're operating some sort of childcare benefit, there are businesses that specialize in administering those benefits. And one of the things they often specialize in is, again, helping find access to childcare through databases, through networks, through relationships. And so there's a couple of really good resources right there. Another way you can go about doing this, though, is by using a free resource that's available through the Kentucky Connect website. Connect is a portal that we can use for accessing a number of different public assistance programs. One of those public assistance programs is a childcare subsidy that we'll talk about in a minute. But one of the great things about the Connect website is that it also offers a searchable database of licensed regulated childcare providers within the state. And so if you just go to the website that's linked here on this PowerPoint, this is also included in our resources document. You can also just Google Kentucky Connect Childcare, and that should eventually land you on a page that looks like what you see over here on the left side of the screen, where you just punch in an address, your city, your county, your zip code. Once you do that, that'll generate a map. Looks similar to this one over here. So if you're looking in, say, Shelby County, you'll see all these different red dots that show you all these different types of childcare providers. And then you also will be presented with a list where you can actually go through and learn about these individual providers, get their contact information, and ways that you can actually get a hold of them. So there's a number of different ways you can access that information. I've always been surprised when I'm talking to a lot of employers, when some of them tell me, you know, we don't think there is any childcare providers in our county or in our area. And that's going to be true. In a lot of instances, childcare deserts are a real thing. But I've talked to a lot of employers too. Once they use this tool, they find out there's actually several childcare providers. And that's a great place for them to start building partnerships. I want to shift gears now and talk about some unique grant opportunities. And we have with us a special guest here today to talk more about these programs, who knows far more about them than I do. which is Andrea Day with the Kentucky Division of Childcare. Andrea, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thanks, Charles, and I apologize for my tardiness. I was technologically challenged there for a moment. But yes, the Division of Childcare does have a number of grant opportunities for providers throughout the state that we are funding with the American Rescue Plan dollars. And as you see on the screen, we have the business partnership grant. That grant is up to $100,000 for a business to start a childcare program. So far, we have only had 3 folks apply for that, 1 in Casey County and 2 in Madison. So please visit the link if that's something you're interested in. Jessica Kane is our project manager for all of these, and she would be thrilled to talk to any of you about what this looks like, what needs to be on the application. We also have the Child Care Desert Area Matching Grant Funds. That too is up to $100,000. We have seen more interest in that. Over half of our counties are considered child care deserts. We are happy to report that we've had 17 applicants so far for those. So that is promising to have those startups in that area. And again, those are in a number of different counties. We also have the family child care startup grants, and sometimes employers find those a little more helpful. They're smaller. They're smaller programs that are they're in a provider's home, so the number of kids is less, but you can sometimes recruit a provider close to your place of business. That way your employees have somewhere close that they could get to their child if they're sick or not feeling well or whatever it could be. That proximity brings peace of mind. Those are $2,500 a piece. And we've had 20 of those so far. We started that with our CARES money and got a little momentum, but we have started a staffed family child care network across the state in 5 different regions to really provide the technical assistance needed for these entrepreneurs to start a small business in their home that in turn supports larger businesses in their communities. So that one is, we are having more success with that. The facility repair grant, those are for providers who want to make improvements to their center related to health and safety overall. It's not for expansion or anything like that, but something that promotes health and safety, whether it be a new commercial washer and dryer to make sure that linens and sheets and things for nap time are clean, or whatever that you need. Those are 100 that I am struggling today. I apologize, guys. Those are 10,000 a piece, and we have had 800 folks apply for those. And we encourage anyone that is a provider to apply for those, to make those upgrades to make your centers safer and healthier for the kids that you serve. And then here's the link that Charles has shared. Those have applications for all 4 of these grants. Like I said, Jessica Kane is the project manager, and we'll be happy to walk through any of these with anyone that reaches out to her.
Thank you, Andrea. And if you're okay with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a couple of questions on these grant programs. That way, if you need to cut out after this portion of the webinar, you can feel free to do that. One question that I know that's come up is, can the business partnership grant program and the Child Care Desert grant program essentially be combined? So in other words, if you're an employer offering that in a Child Care Desert, can you utilize both?
Might help if I take myself off mute. It's one or the other.
Okay, good to know. And then deadlines for particularly the business partnership grant?
That is December 31st of this year. That is the deadline right now. Obviously, as I said, we've not had the interest that we had hoped. So we will look at alternatives moving forward of how we might be able to utilize those funds in another way to help support businesses and our families.
And then another question that came in is, can the business partnership grant be used to contract with a company that assists employees in finding childcare?
I don't want to misguide you. So if you can reach out to Jessica Kane, and that's Jessica, JESSICA.Kane, CAIN at ky.gov to walk through that. I would hate to misinform you.
And then can nonprofits apply for the business partnership grant?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Any other questions from folks in the audience? If other questions do come up, again, Andrea put Jessica's email and contact information in the chat so we can utilize that. Thank you, Andrea, for not only shepherding these programs, but for telling us a little more about them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I put my email in the chat as well. So please feel free to reach out to me. And if I can't answer, I'll get you to the right folks.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. All right. A continuing theme, I think, throughout the course of this conversation will be, with those grant programs, that's a lot of money on the table. I want to talk about a few more instances of money on the table that employers could be tapping into as an opportunity to, again, address some of those childcare challenges for their workers. So we're going to get into a couple of different tax credit programs that I certainly think employers need to be aware of. One of the largest federal tax credit programs in this space is called the Employer Provided Child Care Tax Credit. Sometimes this is referred to as the Child Care Facilities Tax Credit. The official title, though, is Employer Provided Child Care Tax Credit. This is a tax credit that can be taken against your federal income tax liability. The way it works is, I think, really simply explained in this graphic that's at the bottom. Essentially, if you have expenditures related to providing a qualified childcare facility or expenditures related to to contracting with a qualified childcare facility on behalf of your employees, you can claim a tax credit worth about 25% of those total expenditures with an annual limit of $150,000. You can also claim a 10% tax credit of total expenditures for contracting with one of those CCR&Rs that we talked about at the beginning of this webinar. So those child care resource and referral agencies. So it's pretty good size credit in the scope of things. A couple of the small details on this: it is what we call a non-refundable tax credit. So in the world of tax credits, you have refundable tax credits and non-refundable tax credits. A non-refundable tax credit means it is essentially limited based on your tax liability. So let's say you owe $50 in federal income taxes, but you have a $100 federal income tax credit. A non-refundable credit means you can only utilize $50 of that. You can't carry it over beyond what you owe and receive a refund. That would be what's called a refundable credit. We'll talk about some refundable credits here in a minute. One of the things about this tax credit, though, is that it can be carried back. It can also be carried forward. So what that means is if you can claim this credit, but it's not useful in the particular year that you're in, maybe you're as an employer, you took a loss that year, you could carry it forward to a future year and utilize it then and offset some income tax liability that you have there. This can also be combined with the general business expense deduction. So obviously, if you have a qualified childcare facility, you're going to be incurring significant expenses from that. You can still deduct those expenses, and you can combine this credit with that to actually create a larger tax savings. We'll look at exactly how that looks here in just a minute. To access this, though, it's going to be Form 8882. You can click the link for that right there and learn more about the Employer Provided Childcare Tax Credit Program. To give you a sense of the sort of scope of savings that you could be talking about, this is just a quick example of where an employer potentially makes a one-time expense associated with acquiring, constructing, rehabilitating, or expanding property to be used as part of a qualified childcare facility to the tune of about $1 million. Once you combine the employer-provided childcare tax credit with the general business expense deduction, you're looking at savings close to around $330,000. And so that's a pretty large offset if you're able to fully maximize that credit with the business expense deduction at the same time. So again, this is one of those things where if you're an employer and you are contemplating an on-site center or maybe partnering with an off-site center, this is something that you can do to really help recover some of the costs that go into providing that level of care. or that level of benefit to your employees. So it is a very important tax credit that can really help offset those costs. I will say this is a heavily underutilized tax credit. In past years, very, very small amounts of what were projected to be used ended up actually being utilized. So this is something that I think employers should take a close look at. There is no state level equivalent for it. We'll talk about some instances where there are state level equivalents here in just a few minutes, but this is solely going to be a federal tax income liability type credit. Another important thing for employers to know about is something called the dependent care assistance exclusion. This is also sometimes referred to as the Section 129 exclusion. This is for employers that have a written dependent care assistance program, so that you have some sort of child care assistance program for your employees. It's written down, established part of employee or employer benefit policies. So for example, maybe providing a stipend for childcare, that type of thing. Or maybe it's providing subsidized on-site care. That could potentially be a written dependent care assistance program. Something that's important for employers to understand is that when they're offering these types of benefits, this exclusion allows that employee who's receiving that particular dependent care benefits, they can generally exclude from their taxes up to $5,000 in those benefits. And so what that means is, again, using the example of, say, a stipend of some sort, that is non-taxable income up to $5,000. For the employer, this also applies to Social Security, Medicare, federal unemployment insurance taxes. So there are some savings for employers on this as well. But that's going to be an important exclusion for employers to be aware of if they're offering these types of benefits. You can read more about this through an IRS publication that I think provides a pretty good guide to this. This is also one of those areas where Kentucky's tax code conforms to the federal tax code. So the exclusion applies not only to federal income taxes, but also state income taxes. Moving along here, another really important tool is something called a dependent care flexible spending account, also known as just a dependent care FSA. FSAs is something that folks in the human resources world are going to be pretty familiar with. Flexible spending accounts can be used for a whole host of different things. A lot of folks might also be familiar with HSA, so health savings account. The way a dependent care FSA works is this allows a worker to make a pre-tax contribution from their paycheck to a spending account that they could use specifically for dependent care expenses. This is arguably one of the most common employer-provided childcare related benefits that are out there. Lots of employers are starting to offer these things. They can be pretty advantageous for the worker. In the sense that it allows them to utilize tax-free income to pay for childcare related expenses, but it also reduces their overall taxable income. And when you look at collective savings from offering a dependent care FSA, you can be talking to the tune of about 30%. So that's pretty good. There are maximum contributions every year, and there's all sorts of details that go into this, as there are with all different types of FSAs. So if you want to learn more about this particular program, please click the link below, and that can take you to more information on the dependent care FSA. I want to mention briefly a host of public programs for working families. So far what we've talked about are largely programs that apply specifically to employers that employers can leverage. In some instances, though, there are scenarios where an employer might have an employee who has a particular childcare need. And it might be a matter of just that employer making that employee aware of some of the different types of programs that are eligible or that are available to them that can help them access assistance when it comes to childcare. Particular for employers that might have a lot of entry-level workers, folks that are on sort of the lower spectrum of the wage scale, there is a very, very important program called the Kentucky Child Care Assistance Program, also known as CCAP. CCAP is Kentucky's child care subsidy program. Andrea, who was just on the webinar a few minutes ago, the Division of Child Care operates CCAP, and they do a wonderful job with this. It's a very, very important subsidy program that targets low-income workers. It is one of those things where you do have to be working as part of CCAP, though there's some exceptions to that. You could be in school, you can also be looking for work. But generally, a lot of the folks that are on receiving CCAP, they are actively working. And so it's a very, very important program where they can receive subsidies, could actually help them cover the full cost or almost the full cost of affording childcare. So that's certainly something employers need to be aware of if they have some of those entry-level workers that might need a little bit of assistance with affording it. There's another tax credit program available to working families called the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. Folks might be more familiar with the Child Tax Credit, which of course received a lot of attention during 2021 as a result of the American Rescue Plan. Child Independent Care Tax Credit, though, relates specifically to expenses associated with providing childcare or paying for childcare in order to allow someone to work. The amount that an individual family is available or is eligible for varies based on their income levels. We're looking at roughly a cap of about $2,100 in tax year 2022. This is one of those things where the state piggybacks on this credit with a little bit. We offer a 20% credit of the federal credit. So 20% of the federal credit you can claim at the state level. So that's, again, something where you can maximize that and add in a lot more savings. And finally, I want to mention the earned income tax credit. This isn't specific to childcare, but it does provide some tax relief that working families can use to offset some of the costs associated with childcare. This is, again, a program that's going to primarily target low-income, usually entry-level workers. It's one of those credits that phases in based on how much you earn. So the more you earn initially, the more the credit's worth, and then slowly phases out over time. As you earn more, you get slightly less of that credit over time, but it phases out. It's a good incentive to work, earn more, transition off public assistance, all those types of things, but it also provides a whole lot of assistance that individuals can use to potentially offset costs associated with childcare. Because one of the key features of the earned income tax credit is that it is refundable. So remember when we were talking about refundable versus non-refundable a few minutes ago, this is one where if let's say your federal income tax liability is $50, you have a refundable tax credit worth $100, you can claim that full credit and actually receive a refund for the other $50 of that portion. So it can be a very, very powerful credit that, again, folks need to be made aware of if they're looking for ways to offset some of the costs associated with providing childcare. Okay, we're going to start closing up here in just a minute or two. I do want to mention now a new program that's going to be coming out in the next several months, called the Employer Childcare Assistance, or the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership. This was the result of legislation that was passed in the 2022 legislative session, sponsored by Representative Samara Hebron, which was House Bill 499. This program launches in 2023. April 2023 is when applications will be start being accepted from employers. July of 2023 is when the program itself will actually launch. So money will actually start going out the door in 2023. The way that this program works is that it is essentially a state match for employers who directly assist employees with the cost of childcare. So for example, if you're an employer and you offer an employee $200 a month to assist them with the cost of childcare, assuming all program guidelines are met, the state can step in and match that on a dollar-for-dollar basis up to 100% of the cost of care. So in this instance, the employer offers maybe $200, the state could step in, offer another $200, giving that employee $400 in total assistance to help afford childcare. This is often really, in a lot of ways, in response to a lot of concerns that we heard over the past couple of years about employers who might have an employee who is just sort of on the edge of being able to remain in the workforce due to the cost of childcare. This gives them a tool that employer can utilize to help provide that assistance and really maximize it for the benefit of that employee. These are three-way contracts between the employer, the provider, and an employee. In a lot of situations, all three of these are between the employer, provider, and employee. And then, of course, the state steps in as a fourth party to that contract. Everybody has to agree to do this, but it could be a really powerful benefit for that employee. The state match is going to vary based on the employee's household income. So it really targets a lot of your lower to middle income workers. But as your income increases, you don't have to worry about a cliff effect where suddenly you become ineligible. You can continue receiving these benefits, but just at a much smaller level in terms of the state match. Another one of the key requirements is that the provider that participates in this partnership has to be a Kentucky All-Star provider. That's Kentucky's early childhood quality rating system. So they have to be a licensed regulated provider participating in Kentucky All-Stars. And for 2023, the General Assembly parked about $15 million for this particular program. 25% of that is set aside for small businesses. In terms of the current status of House Bill 499, this is going through the regulatory process. And so what that means is that after the bill is passed, the regulatory agencies are now going to be kind of going through, filling in the gaps, working out the mechanics of the bill. One of the things that means, though, is that the Cabinet for Health and Family Services that is in the process of going through that regulatory process, they're not in a great position where they're able to answer a lot of detailed questions concerning House Bill 499 just yet. We're hoping to get to that point later in this year, where I know we're getting a lot of questions at the chamber. I'm sure the cabinet is as well. And those answers to those questions are going to be forthcoming very, very soon. So what should employers be doing right now to prepare for House Bill 499? I think that's the question that comes up more than anything. First thing you're going to want to do is assess the childcare needs of your employees. Learn more about what the actual needs are of your employees. How much is it costing them? How big of an issue is this for your workforce? To help simplify that process, the chamber has made available a survey template that employers can utilize to ask their employees the types of questions they need to ask to learn more about their childcare needs. You can click the link right here. We also have this, again, this is part of the resources document that's available on the chamber's website. This is a survey template. You can take these questions, modify them, do whatever you want to do, utilize your own survey software, but this gives you a good place to start to gauge the childcare needs of your workers. We also recommend employers spend some time studying the bill and determining your company's ability to succeed in complying with the partnership's requirements. You can read the actual bill language itself, linked right here. It's not scary. Statute's not the most fun thing to read. I don't recommend reading before going to bed, but you can work your way through it. You can also partner with third-party benefit administrators, like I mentioned at the start of this webinar, who's they excel in working through programs like this and helping you prepare to meet the administrative requirements to be in alignment with House Bill 499. Third thing we recommend doing is developing relationships with area childcare providers. So if you don't have good relationships with your providers, if you don't know them, if you don't know where they are, now's the time to start doing that. Again, go back and use some of those resources that we mentioned at the top of the webinar to learn more about how you might go about doing it. But certainly leveraging this new survey template that the chamber is providing, I think that's a great place to start for any folks that are going to be interested in House Bill 499 and potentially participating in that process. I want to close with just emphasizing the return on investment that a lot of employers see when it comes to providing childcare benefits to employees. Employee turnover is really expensive, and childcare is going to be a really big driver of employee turnover, in addition to just attracting employees and allowing people to participate in the workforce in the first place. But when you look at employee turnover cost, for a really low wage, maybe low skill employee, it's probably 16% of their particular salary. But as you start increasing skill levels and start increasing compensation, those employees become particularly more expensive to replace in terms of turnover. And you could be dealing with amounts upwards of 231% of an employee's annual turnover. So doing everything we can to prevent attrition within our workforces can often be well worth the investment. We know that childcare is one of those things that working families place a really, really high premium on. The survey here, I think, just gives you a quick sense of this. There's dozens of other surveys that can kind of underscore the importance that employees place on childcare related benefits and how that allows them to continue to participate in the workforce. So it's certainly worth looking at. Again, as Andrea mentioned, there's money on the table through these grant programs. There's money on the table through tax credit programs. And of course, in House Bill 499, there's about $15 million on the table and lots of different ways for employers to become engaged in this space. Links here, again, this is something we'll send out to folks that register for the webinar. The Kentucky Chamber's Childcare Resource Guide, that is certainly a great resource. Our recommended questions for the survey, so the survey template, information to get in touch with the Kentucky Division of Childcare, and of course, my contact information. You can reach out to me and we're happy to assist in any way we can. So I think we went a little over, 5 minutes over, so I apologize for that. If folks have any questions, please feel free to post those. Just real quick, yeah, the links on the Zoom screen might not work. Again, we'll have those posted. We'll send out this webinar, or we'll send out the recording and the slide deck as well. Any other questions, folks, can always feel free to email me directly. Once again, though, we're going to close out with that. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to learn a little more about these different resources that are available. Once again, reach out if you have any questions. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. Have a good afternoon.